We're still, it's 1:30 in the morning my time. You haven't went to sleep in Riyadh, but you did interview Bill and Devin Haney after covering the fight at ringside. I had a separate video where I gave them their props, admitted that I did have Norman in this fight. But but if you guys go back, the analysis was always on point on how Haney could win, and I always gave Haney his props and all that. I even ended our last video, Raheem, forcing this last tidbit. I said, by the way, because I made so much about how Haney has to win this fight on the outside with the jab and the straight right hand, the long range weaponry. I at least made a note. I said Devin Haney does have a lead left hook and a check left hook, and he winds up. Norman was supposed to have the timing and the left hook, and there's a beautiful bit of poetic irony there for Haney to have that left hook hooking with the. You're not supposed to hook with the hooker, and Norman was supposed to be able to jab with the jabber. He couldn't do what you're supposed to do, jab with the jabber, and Haney made the biggest risk you're not supposed to take with a guy with a hook and almost knocked them out in the second round. We'll get into all of it, but what are some of your takeaways, man?
It was an entertaining post fight as much as it was an entertaining fight. Bill definitely watches our show. He pulled me up on my doubting Devin Haney. However, he was wrong about that. I didn't argue with him. I understood what he thought he was hearing. But what I said was, this is the moment where Devin has to define the truth for Devin. That there are doubts in his mind, regardless of what he'll ever tell us or should tell us. That this was the night when he had to put that Garcia narrative to bed, when he had to prove that that was a fluke or a cheat or a no contest that shouldn't be considered, where he has to face an opponent with the biggest weapon being the weapon that stopped him in the Garcia fight and has made people doubt him ever since. That he had a order on his table that he had to fill. And he did that. I never said he couldn't do it.
They're going to
I
say he
said that
didn't
that's what he
stop.
needed
People in
to
the
do.
comments are going to be pissed because they're going to say he stopped. Garcia stopped him with the hook when he didn't get stopped. I know what you mean. You meant stop his momentum, stop his ascent, stop his dominance in that fight. But yeah,
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. What I mean is from the moment that Garcia fight was finished, there's been nothing but doubt and question lofted at Devin Haney. And his last performance out prior to Saturday night in New York didn't do him any favors. It made him look gun shy. It made him look too cute by half. Like maybe he was no longer willing to engage. Maybe he no longer could engage. Maybe he believed he was chinny. All these things that we could speculate on and talk about his mental state and be pop psychologists. We've heard it all. We've seen the memes. Like this is what I'm saying, that it was absolutely on the table last night as to whether or not that was going to be cemented as part of Devin Haney's brand and legacy, or if he was going to clear the table of that and move forward. He cleared the table of it and moved forward. And to Bill Haney's credit, that is what Devin Haney said in the post fight was the game plan that he went in there with was absolutely flawless. He executed it the way he was told to execute it, and they got the results that they expected by fighting the way they fought. He took the left hook away and then became the aggressor with the left hook.
puncher in the fight.
I believe that Haney's real dream for the fight was to knock Norman out with a left hook because I saw him reaching for it. I saw him going for it when it really wasn't there. I knew he wanted to get it. But after putting Norman over in the second round, the fight was never really out of his hands after that moment. In that moment, that was when Haney was like, oh, okay. That's really when it cleared. That's when the table cleared for him. That's when he got what he needed internally to get past that Garcia fight and even the fight in New York. And it took maybe another 10 rounds for the rest of us to be sure. But after that knockdown in the second round, Devin Haney was sure. Devin Haney was back.
Yeah, and any time he would catch Norman with something clean, he hurt him. Norman's legs would react. His jab was beautiful. The up jab, beautiful weapon, and he used it beautifully in this fight. And even had a little of that Larry Holmes cocked at the waist, and you feint, and a feint come up with the up jab, and he busted up Norman's face and nose and eye with that jab. It was money. And on the other side, I said heading in, if Norman can match the jab, he's going to win the fight. If he can't, he's going to get outboxed. but he has a good jab, Norman. It may not be the most educated jab and all that, but it's long, it's fast, it's sharp. He won the first round with that jab, and had a pretty good. Not he didn't land a lot anything really on Haney. He buckled him with a jab at the end of the first round, and then he was getting off first in the second, and then boom, that hook came out of nowhere, and that was the fight. After that, Haney was the puncher. Malik Scott always makes the point. Or no, Breadman Edwards. My bad, my man Breadman Edwards, trainer out of Philly that everybody knows. He would always go. The puncher in the fight is not who hits harder. The puncher in the fight is who can hurt the other guy more with their punches, not necessarily who hits harder. If you hit harder but don't take the shot as good as the other guy, he's the puncher now. So the roles reversed. And, I could talk about Norman maybe has to, of course, cut out those bad habits of jumping in with shots. But that's why he's Brian Norman, the 24-year-old that he is. Devin Haney told him and us this heading in, that inexperience is going to cost him. Because maybe if Brian Norman had a little bit more experience and just stayed a little bit more behind the jab, because you got to trust the jab even when it's not landing. You got to stick with it because it's going to set up and get you closer and all those things. And there was one sequence in the 8th round. He stepped over to his right, stepped over to his left with Haney on the ropes and landed a couple body shots. But he couldn't even if he had executed some of these things, by the way, there was no beating Devin Haney tonight if you're Brian Norman Jr. There just wasn't. And, Haney, I'm going to state the obvious. He looked better at 47 with the power, but I always thought Haney was an underrated puncher. He showed that in the first 2 fights at 140 when he buckled Ryan with that lead hook in the 3rd round, dropped Prograis at 140. So now the power looks better than ever at 47. I think I said this on the other video. I think he's a Hall of Famer at 27. Do you have any disagreement with that? Because 3-division champ and.
I mean, you know how I feel about the Hall of Fame, Sean. It depends on what year he actually gets on the ballot. It
Yeah,
depends on what we value at the time. I don't want to get into my Hall of Fame
yeah, yeah,
nonsense,
yeah, yeah.
but I
Am I
saw when.
crazy for saying that at 27
No, I
after
mean,
3 divisions and.
listen, Sean, you can't be crazy because you get a ballot.
Yeah,
So
I actually do.
you can literally decide that that's true.
He's
The
already
rest of
in on
us
my
have
ballot.
to decide whether or not we agree with you. But nobody gives a fuck whether we agree because we don't get the ballot. You do. So that isn't a question, Sean. It's a statement. You've just decided. That's who you are,
Yeah,
right? What
very
I
good.
saw from Brian Norman was a guy who was resigned from the opening bell that he wasn't going to win a scorecard decision. He was there to knock Devin Haney out. And for all the things that he said in the buildup and how many different weapons he had and how, oh, we're just talking about the left hook, but I got this and I got that. And he does have other tools and other weapons. However, he was relying on that left hook. He didn't think Devin Haney was going to be able to take it away from him. He was going in there to knock him out, expecting that to be his route to victory. And when it wasn't there, when it did get taken away from him, when Devin was able to duck under that left hook on a regular basis and then come back with a counter, was able to control the action, Norman really didn't have anything else to go to that was effective, and he started getting a little bit desperate. Like, I know that leaping left hook is part of his repertoire, but it wasn't calculated. It wasn't well timed. It wasn't set up. He was starting to look and reach for things as rounds went on, and he was getting hurt. My favorite punch of the night was Devin Haney's jab. That's the one that kept making me go, ooh, damn. Like that, there was sharp, clean, right there, up jab, snapping the head back. Like that was a statement jab, and that kept putting Brian back in his place. That was the punch of the night. So, yes, I mean, listen, Brian Norman, I believe, is an entertaining fighter. Will be in more entertaining fights. Definitely has a career and a future, places to go from here. But he's got a lot to learn from this fight, and he can improve. He can get better. I still like his attitude. I like everything about the guy. I don't have no issue with him being a contender in the division again. I wouldn't necessarily mind seeing a rematch somewhere down the line if he were to improve on some things and make it interesting. It's all good. But tonight, he got outclassed, outboxed, outmaneuvered by the coaching and was really bested in every way that a fighter will say is levels. Like what I've just described is what could easily be captured with one word: levels. Devin Haney brought the levels.
like he said he would. And I really like Brian Norman as well. My only concern for him long term, the technical stuff that can be smoothed over to an extent. He can improve in those areas. But I wondered because I knew Norman was chinny early in fights, but I thought he might be one of these guys. Remember, Trinidad would get dropped early, Marquez would get dropped early. Some fighters, in a way, goes down sometimes. Some guys early they get dropped, but or they get hurt. But as the fight goes on, they get their legs underneath them and they take punches much better. And I thought Norman might have been able to do that. Might have been one of those guys. So the early knockdown actually didn't surprise me. But what did surprise me was anytime Devin touched him, he hurt him. Is that a problem for Norman long term?
You can't be the kind of fighter that he is
A
and
puncher
be
who's got to press the fight. And
right. You cannot be that guy and be chinny. You cannot be that guy and not have punch resistance because you're going to have to eat some shots to get that kind of offense off. If you're going to walk people down, if you're going to be the bully, if you're going to leap in with left hooks, then you got to be able to take punches between your punches. And your punches not only still have to land, but they still have to have mustard. They still got to have power on them. That's how guys that fight the way Brian Norman fights that really took their career to its potential got it done. Even I punch in between his punches, but when his punch lands, it still hurts. That's a puncher. That's a bully. That's a tough man to beat. If that guy doesn't have the boxing skills, that's what makes up the difference. Yes, it's a problem.
mm, well, give me 1 second. My bad. I lost my train of thought. Um, fuck. That was I say. Oh, all right. Well, on a separate note, I thought in particular the first half was brilliant by Haney. I thought in some spots, 7, 8, 9, he thought about it, and Norman, to his credit, was still dangerous enough, still winging shots enough with decent enough timing. I think there was one part, might have been a hook or a left uppercut. I think it was what you were talking about earlier. He like loaded up the shot. It was weird for a guy who was so disciplined and smart all night. He had this one or two sequence where he tried to load up on a shot. It was one sequence. He tried to load up on a left uppercut or a left hook. And Norman was good, was still timing was still good enough to hit him with a jab and bop his head up with that. And I think Haney just said, what's the point? Haney was capable of stopping him in this fight, but why even open the door just the slightest to give Norman an opportunity? And that is the Floyd Mayweather school that he learned so well from. The fight is won. The game plan is working. Let's go home with a wide dub and the victory and getting untouched. And that's what he did. And I saw on social media because I want to acknowledge and not just people say it's a Haney glaze fest, but people were saying in this that some people thought it was boring down the stretch, and they talked about the clinching. Look, especially down the stretch, Norman was clinching Haney just as much as Haney was clinching Norman. Earlier in the fight, Haney was tactically tying him up whenever Norman tried to drive him to the ropes, and then he'd reset in the center of the ring and get back to outboxing him. Down in the last 2 rounds in particular, Norman was actually holding him just as much as he was, and Haney impressed me down the stretch in that Norman was supposed to, and he did in the first round or so before the knockdown, supposed to manhandle Haney on the inside with that country strong strength. And down the stretch, it was Haney getting better leverage on the body shots in the clinch and in real tight. But he did taper down in the second half of the fight. But this was one of the fights where you just gotta win. You had to beat this guy, and he did.
let me jump in on just the clinching, and then I'll let you finish that thought. Haney wisely took away the one place where Brian was having consistent success inside. Brian was doing good work inside. And Haney shut that down, yes, by clinching, by putting his head down and putting his shoulder up into Brian's chest, forcing Brian to do something else. Everything Brian wanted to do, Haney forced him to do something else. And when he initiates the clinch, then it's Haney who is controlling the clinch and with the free hand can get some work in. he can position where he is in the clinch if he initiates the clinch. Yes, I know to some degree it's illegal to if it's excessive. That's up for the referee to decide. Doesn't make for a super action-packed fight. But I saw what he was doing, and by the time you're down the stretch, again, you're not about to open no doors for an opponent who does have punching power to do something crazy and take everything away from you that you've built towards the ninth or eighth round. So that was a wise decision on Haney's part. It wasn't, to me, something that made the fight a stinker. It's strategic, and there was still action, like you say, inside. But it was just it was a little bit of tussling, a little bit of wrestling, and Norman was worse for the wear. So earlier in the fight, if that had been the strategy, I think Norman would have got the best of the clinches. Norman might have gotten a little separation and done some better work inside. But by this time, that jab had been punishing his face. He'd already been knocked down once. He was frustrated. He knew time was running out. Haney's controlling the fight. And now he's dominating the clinch. So he didn't have what he would have had earlier in the fight to tussle and to manhandle Haney anymore. He was already breaking down. It was a wise strategic choice to do that, and it for me was just another element of the fight, not one that slowed it down.
So now, like a potential rematch with Garcia, if Garcia gets past Barrios in February, which a lot of people will be picking him, that's the biggest fight in boxing now. At least in the United States, it is. Maybe Canelo and Crawford, if they have some rematch that nobody's really asking for, they can outdraw them because they're Canelo and Crawford, or some Jake Paul fight, right? Jake Paul. But I think I'm still tempted to say a rematch between Haney and Garcia that's a welterweight unification title fight with all the storylines and everything. I kind of think is the biggest fight in the United States potentially next year.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Crawford Boots would rival it. However, and before we just leave this fight from Haney and Norman behind, I do want to say this because, yes, I'm expecting in the comments the Haney glaze and the, oh, Sean, you had it so wrong and now you're big up. And listen, we criticize these guys because that's part of being a pundit. It's part of analysis. You look for things to pick apart. You do nitpick at times. You spotlight small things that you think can become big problems. And when they have to listen to us do that, and you got to get picked against sometimes, then when it goes your way and you put on a good show, then should we not give as much energy to the salute, to the tip of the hat, to what you did right and well and things you corrected as we gave to all of the criticism when it was going wrong? That's how I look at it.
That's like, just me. If I picked against you, yeah, I might put a little something extra on it when you do the job.
Deserve that.
Because
you deserve that.
Not tonight. Not right now at 1:50 a.m. after he pulled off this win. I'll save more critiques for when they're real and they're deserved for another time. But tonight, this was Haney's night. He beat the #1 welterweight in his first fight at 47. So,
and if Brian Norman had given us more to criticize Haney about, believe me, we'd mention it. It's not like we're gonna just overlook potential criticism. We did that with Abdullah Mason just now, which I really thought was fight of the night, but we had to look at the problems there. Except that we are not biased. We are not looking to tear guys down or artificially build them up. We're just saying what it is when it is. And on the night when a guy puts to bed a negative narrative, when he answers questions that we've been asking, that doubts that he has had to deal with and live with for weeks, if not months, sometimes years, then you have to use the same amount of energy on your platform and the same full-throated expression of gratitude that you do when you get that shovel out and start burying guys. That's all I'm saying. So when we look past this fight into Garcia, guess what? It's Garcia now who has questions to answer. He's the one coming off of a loss. He's the one who got the PED negative adverse findings in the fight against Haney. He's the one who had the mental breakdown and he came in super overweight. Even though Haney accepted the fight, it did seem like something that shouldn't have happened. And now that fight has totally been expunged. He's the one now where we're going to be looking very critically at all of his flaws, all of his potential small and big opportunities for um, Barrios to take advantage of. When we do break that fight down, that's how it's going to be. Haney's crossed that bridge now. Haney's on the other side waiting on Garcia to get
Yeah.
there.
Yep.
If Garcia doesn't get past Barrios or doesn't fix these problems or has another mental breakdown before that fight or comes in super overweight or God forbid gets popped again on PDs, all of these things are possible until you prove they're no longer part of your narrative. Now it's Garcia's time to make the fight. He missed the opportunity to make the fight when the fight was already made in New York because he lost the fight. And Haney was not entertaining, so it made it very easy to just shovel and put that fight to the side until they could build themselves back. Haney has arrived. Now we're just waiting on Garcia to get there. I love these narratives. We're going to be critical of Garcia, and guess what? If he gets in there against Barrios and looks better than he's ever looked, which I think Haney looked better than he's ever looked, then we're going to give him the credit for that. But expect between now and that Barrios first bell ringing that we're going to pull Garcia up on all the nonsense, point out all the flaws, look with a microscope at all the opportunities that Barrios can take advantage of. And Barrios is coming off the back of what I think should have been a loss to Pacquiao.
Hey, to quote Devin Haney, Allah is the perfect planner. This was a blessing in disguise that the Garcia rematch didn't go as scripted because Garcia would still be a guy who's never won a title. And let's say Haney would have got his revenge tonight. Let's say their rematch would have been tonight. A lot of the people would still feel like Brian Norman would beat him, and some of those guys would beat him. So you may not have gotten the sweet revenge against Garcia yet, but you might have. This was actually a blessing in disguise. You got to be a world champion again and beat the #1 welterweight in the world, and that was really what built the Haney brand. Was the substance of beating top opponents. He wasn't some sideshow or caught up in a bunch of controversy. The path he was on when he was built his most momentum was the traditional path, rack up belts and accomplishments. So this was actually a blessing in disguise for him. And if Garcia could hold up his end of the bargain, then blessing in disguise for both of them, actually, because then their rematch means a lot more than the first fight. It's at the more glamour division. It's not a super lightweight fight. It's a welterweight fight now. It's a unification. So yeah, I had gotten my fill of their chaos that first time in Brooklyn, but it crossed over. Ryan is friends with all the biggest influencers that have the minds and the hearts of the youth, and Haney became kind of unfairly in the aftermath of that fight this heel that became the most lambasted fighter in 18 months. So yeah, it's gonna be red hot, but we'll see what we get. But Haney owns the night on that one. Good stuff.
We'll call the rematch Armageddon.